please feel free to ask questions and make it as interactive as possible. Okay, so I want to start off to talk about web services, just basically to make sure that we are all on the same page. The web service has been around a long time, 20 plus years or so. So when we talk about web services, we're talking about really an application to application interface. So we're not talking about just something running on an IIS server just to do HTML pages. When we talk web services, talking about application to application interface is something pretty much for those of us on a nonstop platform familiar with, because it is what we do: client server, requester server, and that's what it is. The difference is that we're talking about web service across different platforms, heterogeneous platforms, right? And so one of the first web service that we all know came along was based on SOAP. So this portion here we're talking about the stack is that the web service was built on the SOAP architecture, so different layers. You have the HTTP, and XML is the ability for exchanging data format across different platforms. And above that, there's a SOAP protocol. And then you have this thing called a WSDO, which is basically describe the service. Those are some of the terminologies for all of you who have used SOAP before, pretty standard, right? So, and that works really well. Basically, we're talking about the SOA, the service-oriented architecture. We have the WSDO, you have the service provider, you have the requester, and you publish. So all that actually run really well. But as things evolved, the new architecture came up, and so there's this thing called the REST. So it is still a web service, except it's a new perspective, a new design. And let's talk a little bit about as far as how that came about. So it is something that this guy, Roy Fielding, which is one of the computer scientists, is pretty well known in the Apache project. And so he did his PhD thesis on it. So one of the things that what his goal was, he said, web service is great, SOAP is great, but I want to make it simpler. The premise is that a lot of the things going to happen across the internet, across the web, and across using HTTP and SSL protocol. So I'm going to leverage all those things. I'm going to make things much more simple. Right? I want to get the same benefit of web service from application interface, but what I want to do is to be able to actually leverage the protocols in place to make things simpler. So what REST does is leverage heavily on the HTTP protocol, what is there to facilitate operation. It takes advantage of the URI, the URL, to use that to convey information. And then it also uses JSON instead of XML to share the common data. And so what it basically allows you to do is it becomes very popular using REST to simplify the operation of how to access database cross functions or application interface. Right? So again, there's nothing wrong with SOAP on a functional basis. But what REST is designed to do is to reap the same benefits, but make it simpler. So it allows it, for example, not use XML, use JSON. So on the client level, it does not require XML parser. Right? XML is very verbose, so it consumes more bandwidth. JSON messages are smaller, so it takes less bandwidth, get there faster. Right? And from a troubleshoot perspective, so if you eliminate the need to understand the SOAP protocol, and pretty much if you can look at a HTTP message, you can read it, and you can pretty much understand how REST works. So we'll see more examples of that, how it gets simplified. So again, the purpose of REST is to provide same benefits of web service application to application interface, but make it better and faster, right? So like Casey was saying before, more and more people are using REST. In fact, it's pretty much becoming the de facto standard. Anytime you have system to system, application to application interface, the first question comes up like, can we use REST, right? There's still systems out there, applications out there that use SOAP. They probably continue to use SOAP, but any type of new applications, any type of new requirements, REST is the way to go. Again, we talked about the benefits is simple, because it uses JSON. It leverages what's already there, HTTP, HTTPS, and URI, and it allows it to get from one system to another system using less data, less interaction, right? And more importantly, this is very important because when you build application interface, one is the client, the other one is server, or on non-stop we call request to server. But when you go across platform, the most of the time the client that comes into the server is built for the UI is built on a browser or built upon a desktop, and a lot of frameworks, a lot of stuff basically are now on the desktop using frameworks that supports REST because it is most compatible on browser, desktop, as well as on mobile phone and all that. So, and JavaScript tools, all the stuff have built-in capability to do using REST. And here's the important part: always my belief is one of the reasons you want to pick a technology beside technology is good is you want to be able to have a lot of tools. You want to be able to have a lot of resources to know how to use those tools. And REST, there are more people, especially young developers, that knows REST than SOAP. So if you're going to build an application and you have a new team, and chances are the new team of people, especially that are not on the nonstop, would prefer to use REST. In fact, that's the only thing they know is REST instead of SOAP. I'm going to pause for a minute. Is there any questions, any comments so far? Anyone? If you have any questions, you can either ask them when I pause, or you can please put in the question box or chat box, and Casey is going to help me sort out the questions, and we'll be glad to go through that when we have a pause. Okay. So again, just very quickly, I know that most of you probably know XML, probably know JSON, but I just want to give a quick rundown, right? The fact is that JSON provides same function XML in the fact that it is a way to store, exchange data across platforms. And if you remember, one of the reasons why XML it makes it easy to exchange data across platforms because everything is ASCII text, right? So it is no binary number. So everything is expressed in text, which makes it transportable. And it is the source responsibility to convert it from internal format to external format, serializing it. And it's the destination side to be able to deserialize it back internal format. So by exchanging in ASCII text, it makes the independent of the platform's internal structure. JSON gives you the same benefit, except that it is actually less verbose. So here's just a small example of what on left-hand side JSON looks like. On right-hand side is XML, and they're actually conveying the same information. And this is not an extreme example, just a simple example, and shows like as far as you can sort of glance, you can see that XML is more verbose. If we were to take a real big document, you will see actually the XML payload is much larger than JSON. So why would you not use something that's more lightweight and where you can reap the same benefits? So a lot of times people say, well, when do we use SOAP, when we use REST, and try to give an analogy as far as they both provide the same function. I found this diagram, this picture, which I thought is a good analogy. The fact is that SOAP is basically, if you want to write someone, you need to have a letter, you need to write a letter, you need to put an envelope, and you have to be able to put a stamp and so forth and to mail it. Whereas REST is a postcard. So you can see that things are a lot more simple. Everything is already blocked out where things are supposed to be. And the message is smaller, it's more precise, the postcard may be prepaid. So if you want, the point is that if you want to get something quickly done, a postcard is a quick way for you to get the message across. Everything's built, it's easier to pick it up and use that. And so it takes more work. Now, in certain applications, when they say, well, I want to write a very complex message and all stuff, fine, you can use SOAP. But you can see as far as benefits of if you want to get things from application to application to be able to build something quickly, REST in an analytic postcard can get the message across much more quickly because it's standardized and everyone knows how to use that, right?
Hey, Phil, we
Yeah.
have a question from David Hughes. Does JSON have the same restrictions on certain characters like XML escape characters?
I'm sorry, Casey, you came across a little bit muffled.
Sorry about that. So David is asking, does JSON have the same restrictions on certain characters like XML?
So the JSON provides the same capability to encode data. In fact, you know what? Maybe I'll let David, Dave Belleville. Dave, can you help me answer that question, please, Dave?
Yeah. So what I was asking Phil is that, in XML, there's certain characters that are prohibited inside the payload, right? So you can't use, like, for example, the greater than sign, less than sign, ampersand.
Right.
So
Right.
JSON doesn't have those restrictions, correct?
Well, actually, in both cases, the data could be encoded as a payload. You cannot just arbitrarily insert it in there. And if it is special characters you want to send, it need to be escaped into that. Yeah, Dave Belleville, do you want to anything to add to what I just said, Dave Belleville, please?
Yeah, sure, Phil. In a JSON payload, the property names are restricted to valid variable names for JavaScript, but the values themselves don't have the same restrictions as XML. Like, you can put in brackets and ampersands and things like that. If you run into a case where you need to send something like binary data in a JSON payload, typically that's sent as base 64. It's base 64 encoded and then decoded on the other end. And and we provide support for that in LightWave for decoding that into a base 64 string in a JSON message into a binary field in an IPM.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, David. Casey, do we have any other questions?
No, we do not.
I guess not.
No.
Okay. All right, great. So this is just a simple example as far as what a REST request looks like versus a SOAP. These two requests perform the same function, right? And so as you can see, the SOAP request is a lot more verbose. And now this is just a simple example, but you can see the idea as far as the reason REST requests can perform the same thing as what's at the bottom is because it leverages using the HTTP method to convey information. It uses the URI to convey information, whereas the SOAP has to incorporate all this information within the payload itself. So that's one of the things what makes REST lightweight is the fact it leverages HTTP, the URI, the method to use those standards to convey information instead of having to incorporate that in the payload. And the other benefit is that when you do that, so that means technically you can type this in the browser and get you to reach the application, get back data without even having a program, because all this is just HTTP. Whereas you're going to do this, you need to have some way to be able to generate an XML parser to be able to call that and get back the data. Okay, all right. So let me just quickly go through this. So assume that if you're not familiar with REST, I just want to share with you some terms so we can talk to that. So when people say RESTful API, you'll hear a lot of terms like that. If you use SOAP right now, you have no problem migrating to REST. The only thing you have to just be careful about is some terms that are under different name, but same thing. So when people say we're using RESTful API, that means they're developing REST services. Same thing. So if I want you to call my API, that means you want to call my REST service. Okay, RESTful API. Base URL. So that's basically the main address of the application. For example, if this here will be the base URL, www.active.com. This is the base URL, and this here are the additional paths. So that's base URL, the path. So this is important for me to talk about, is because this one is secret why REST is more efficient, is faster, because you can leverage using this how you define the path to route the request. So instead of having put that in the payload itself, say, okay, request code 101, then is inquiry, and then to talk to this particular object, you can say, I can define, if I say /phone book, and just get method, that means I'm actually want to go to the phone book file, go to user details field, the val 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to do a read. So that allows you to define use the path to define how to route the request without having to define the payload. And LightWave allow you to define that dynamically, how you want to route that to get there. Methods, and I said that before, that REST is based on HTTP, but the key thing what we're saying here is the fact that you allow you to use GET to convey information. So for example, the standard way is that if I call a mention, I want to do inquiry. If I'm going to do update, I'll do a post, right? So if I come in across a GET, then it automatically the other side says, oh, you want to do inquiry. I'll just look at the URL and pass information back to you, right? So methods are very important. So these are some things that you will see over and over again. HTTP response, same thing. There is also leveraging HTTP response to convey information without having to put in the response payload. Like for example, it must come back say part not found. So usually when you do the server, they have to put that in the response payload. But you don't have to, because if you use HTTP protocol, you can say that instead of having to reply data in the response, I can skip back a 404 that tells us it's not found. The client automatically knows that. So I can even have an empty response because the 404 that tells it, you know what, it's almost like, is the analogy is like on a nonstop. If you write a program, if you write to a process and the process is going away, you get error 14. So if you're going to do REST, it's much simpler. And people ask you about what's the RESTful API, what's the base URL, the path, methods, and all that. The other term you probably want to know is called Swagger. If you're using SOAP, then you're familiar with WSDL. WSDL is what the server side will produce to tell the client side everything you need to access the service, and all that. Well, Swagger is the equivalent of a WSDL, but for the REST world. And instead of the XML document, it's basically a JSON document, right? So the idea is that if you are going to allow the nonstop to provide a REST service, like using LightWave server, you would then produce a Swagger, which LightWave server can, to allow the external client to come into the nonstop. Likewise, if you're going to consume from a nonstop an external REST service, you want to first ask the external web server, do you have a Swagger? Because if you have a Swagger, then LightWave client allow you to import in and does everything for you. So that's pretty much a quick way to look at as far as what are different things with REST. And again, if what we're advocating is that SOAP 20 years ago is great web service, but really now what you need to do is look at REST, because REST opens up nonstop to a lot more possibilities. Allows you to talk to different platforms, allows you to talk to different devices, including Alexa. You can talk to mobile phones and all that, right? And you can look at communicating REST with both as a nonstop, as to provide REST service to the enterprise, or be able to consume external services, right? So to summarize, REST makes it simpler, and it can provide same functionality and more what SOAP can provide. And we'll take a look next as far as LightWave product suite, how it provides the REST function on a nonstop. So quick pause. Any questions? Any comments?
322-172-496.
Hey, Kevin, just so you know, you're not muted.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. And David Lorenz, you are not as well. Just so you are aware. Ooh.
Okay. So while I was offline trying to get my computer working, I think Gabriel, you were asking about assuring folks about the soap they're using. So Lance, what soap product are you using again? I'm sorry, I wasn't privy to that discussion. Lance, are you on? Are you mute?
And I've got 2 mute buttons. Great. So we're using the product that came with the HP, and it was the HP
Okay.
person who taught us how to use it.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So you're using nonstop soap. Yeah. So so the NuWave product suite is much better. And here are some of the highlight things that we'll talk about, and we'll take a look at it. So first thing is that the LightWave product suite runs on Guardian, not OSS. Right? That's a big thing. And it says now again, my internet connection is unstable. So it also supports fault tolerant process pair, TMF, all that. But here's the major thing is one of the key thing about the LightWave product suite is the fact is that everything is incorporated in 1 or 2 processes, and it supports everything. And browser-based management is very big point. It's very easy to use and it's easy to maintain. We can pretty much put anyone in front of the LightWave product, you can install it in 5 to 10 minutes. You can bring up the browser interface in another 5 minutes. And with 5 to 10 minutes, you'll be able to use how to start using LightWave to expose pathway servers as REST or to consume external REST services. So we'll take a look and see what it looks like. Diagnostic log is extremely important. I always tell people, I said, no matter what product you use, you always need to figure out one day you're gonna have a problem. The problem may not be the product itself, maybe your application, maybe the other side. You need to have the right tool to diagnose very quickly where the problem is. And with LightWave, the diagnostic tool is fantastic, and you can use it to diagnose problem in development as well as production, right? So, and we'll take a look and see what are different things that with the LightWave server and LightWave client. So, let's start with LightWave server. The idea is to be able to expose nonstop applications to the outside world. And as I said before, is that with REST, you have much broader scope of clients that you can access now nonstop. Like you can, for mobile, you can have Alexa devices, you can have browser and so forth. And on a nonstop, you can access pathway applications as well as standalone applications. If you have used SOAP AM, so you see that the LightWave server is just like SOAP AM server, except better. The interface is better and it's cleaner and it's higher performance. But one of the major things is you can use it for is just like people use SOAP AM server is to modernize the user interface, right? This is what we encounter out there all the time is people look at nonstop and say, especially new people who doesn't know nonstop. This is really old-fashioned system. It's green screen. It cannot be any good. So one of the first things people use a LightWave server for, very popular, is to be able to modernize the UI, right? And with LightWave server, you can do it pretty easily. And what that does, that allows you immediately expose your nonstop pathway applications or standalone applications to be accessed with web browser or by JavaScript, by different JavaScript framework, or mobile applications. So, hey, quick question, Lance. Your current environment right now use nonstop SOAP. Are you using it to expose pathway applications to the outside world, Lance?
We do both. We do have some web services that people call us to get information, and we also call outside web services to get information. And
Got it.
we're currently using that program
Okay.
for both SOAP and REST. So with our C program, we're able
Okay.
to we can deal with the differences between REST and SOAP.
Got it. Got it. Great. Thank you.
But we
So,
want something
yeah,
easier.
yes. So, so let's talk about, so one of the key things, talk about, that's a good segue as far as something easier. And one of the key thing is, let me just see if we can look on here, is the LightWave Server console. So we start talking about LightWave Server. And so basically is that
We're
this
looking for
is, I'm using the browser to communicate with LightWave Server on my nonstop system. Once you start the LightWave Server process, that's it. You don't have to do anything else on Tackle. You basically pretty much use this to talk to it. So if you come here immediately, first thing you can see, it shows me my environment. I have this process is running, and it shows me this is my console, what the port is, what IP address. I'm exposing these services to the outside world using this port for HTTP, this port for HTTPS, and it gives me all other information, right? So even without having much experience with LightWave before, pretty much for administrator, you can sit down, you can pretty much navigate different things on your own. And this shows the different API. So in order to, when you provide access, exposing an application to the outside world, as for example, you're going to expose this path application outside world, you can use the LightWave Server console, and you can make that into a REST service in 5 minutes. So the process is pretty straightforward, and I'll hopefully can show that to you in a couple of minutes. But I want to highlight the fact is that what makes a big difference in the world is the fact that it is a point and click system. So this here, I'm showing you an API that access a logon demo, and I'm going to walk through as far as how it works and so forth. So let's take a quick look at that. But first, what I want to show you here is the fact is that once you start the process on a nonstop, and the console allows you to build APIs, and the environment now is totally managed using a browser. And you can use this to manage the environment, and also when runtime, it will use that to do path send to your applications. And one thing that is really makes it nicer, if you're a SupAM server user and you go to now use LightWave Server, as is one of the enhancements that Dave has put in, is the fact is that it's even more distributed, it's more scalable, because in addition to a process, what you can do now is you can actually create an option list of worker processes and distribute across different CPUs. And so when work comes in to be done, the server can distribute it across an available worker in the CPU very quickly to get the work done. So Kevin Peck, are you online, Kevin Peck? So maybe Kevin is,
There we go. Yeah, I'm looking to unmute
yeah,
again.
so I don't know whether you're aware of that. I think, but Dale was talking about that actually in your environment, you guys running pretty high volume, and you're doing like maybe 16 or 32 worker processes because you have thousands of messages.
We
like
have two LightWave environments on each production node, and they're running, 20 or 30 S workers each.
Okay. Right.
So yeah, we're busy. It's busy all the time.
Okay. And did you remember as far as how many, what is the volume you guys are running?
The volume? No, I don't have that.
Yeah. So that's it.
A lot.
Okay.
How's that?
So,
okay. Yeah, as far as data going back, it's a lot. It's substantial.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you. Yeah. So the idea is scalable. I apologize. So my PowerPoint seems to be hanging up. So I want must come here. So the idea is what I want to show here is if you want to expose a particular server to, oh no. I apologize, my computer is acting up. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, so if I want to expose an application to become a LightWave server, or I just say I want to add, and I want to give it a name. So let's just call it a demo API. And so then what I'll do is I'll specify what's the path to get to this. So for example, if I want to give it a, this is an inquiry function. Okay, so that means in order for when a URL come in, it will get to this path, it will come to this function. And first it says, what method do I want to get here? So it's inquiry. So I'll use a standard, I'll use a get. So this is use get to do an inquiry. This is a descriptive common field. So this I specify as far as what you can either route to a server class or standalone process. If I'm going to server class, I say give the pathmon name. So let's say this is going to my development pathway environment. And say what's the server class name? So I don't know, I'll just say that if I have a logon server, I'll say that. If it is a COBOL program, I want to be space terminated. If it's C program, I want zero terminated. So that's finished that. So request message, and it said, well, what is the request message? Come in. So I would be able to specify a message coming from the dictionaries. So DDL dictionaries, if you have all the IPM dictionary, you can import into LightWave, they can basically pull it out. So I can pull out dictionary, say, okay, this is, and then say which request I want to use the user request. So that's that. And say, how should it come in? It's going to come in, let's say, as the request query parameters. So if I do query parameters, that means it will use whatever names I use the query parameter to pass the map into the IPM itself. Right? So let me just, instead of walking you through all this detail, let me show you the ones already done so we can save some time here. So this is get. So we say if it's request code coming in the query parameter, I want to map to the request code field, username, password, and we reply message. Whatever comes in, I want to send everything back. One thing difference between SOAP and AM, especially in LightWave, is that in the SOAP world, SOAP AM world, you only have really two types of response, 200 and maybe 500. In the REST world, it allows you to actually have defined different type of response based upon the different response code, right? So in this case, we said we will always respond back here with 200 if everything is good. So this basically says, for the way I defined here, I am going to talk to this particular case, a standalone process called KWLGN, and it's going to pass its parameters, and it's going to get back the response. So one of the nice things, so that Lance was talking about before, making things easy. So that's built in a tester. So I click on this thing, automatically it said, okay, you can run test. So I can type in value like here. And actually, so it will populate. So this is what would come in. If I send this, it'll give me an error because it actually goes all the way to the application already. So if I put in the correct one, So it allows me to test things out before exposing this to the outside world. Say you can, so yeah, it's a basically built-in tester, which is one of the really nice thing about the product. Okay, and so each one of them has, so this is different. This using post method, again, you can see that it's not in query, it's in the body. But the idea is the same, is the fact you can create an API in a matter of minutes, you can test it out. And once you test it out, so API, you can say, now I want to expose it as a service. So you can say, I want to create a service. And when you create a service, you say, okay, what is the API you want to build a service out of? And that's it. It's done. So now basically you could generate a Swagger file for the external client to consume it. And
Hey, Phil.
yes,
One of the things that we do at CAS is when we're testing our servers, even if we're not going to expose it as a web service, we put it into a service like this, so because it makes an easy way to test our servers. We can interact with the server and test values and test functionality in the server with that,
good
even
point.
if we're not going to end up
Yes,
using.
very good point.
That's amazing.
Yes, very good point. So yeah, that's Tom Shaper from CAS. Is my friend from St. Louis. So what Tom is saying is this is one of the additional side benefit of doing something like this. So pretty much you can, if you develop COBOL server pathway servers that you do not plan to expose a web service, this allows you automatically to use this tool to test out your COBOL servers using the built-in test tool, right? And so without even having to make it into a actual external web service. Good point. And it's very, very powerful. And to that point also is that when you can take advantage of the diagnostic log of LightWave server, which gives you tremendous interesting information. So here it shows you as far as all the information, how long it takes for the request that comes in, how much time is spent in the server. So you can actually know how much time is spent in the COBOL server. And it shows you what comes in, what goes back out. And listen to this. It also gives the IPM. What's the request? What's the reply? Why is it a big deal? Because sometimes when people say, oh, you gave me the wrong information, it's not working. Then you find they'll say, no, you can actually send the wrong request. Or sometimes maybe it's the server that is incorrect. So with a diagnostic log in LightWave server, it helps you diagnose the issues quickly. And you can select which service to turn on diagnostic log. It's not like on the nonstop, you do SCF trace everything on the socket level. This decode everything for you. It tells you the date and time. It tells you all the information. It's just a lifesaver. It's good for QA, good for development, it's good for production debugging. Right. So again, to summarize, we're talking about LightWave server. You can pretty much, it's very easy for you to create an API, expose a pathway server as a service in a matter of minutes, and you can, there's built-in test tool that allows you to test it easily. It allows you to take advantage of the diagnostic log to debug during the development process or QA or production process. And there's a lot of other ancillary things that you can use, but pretty much, again, all centered around the fact it is a GUI, is a browser-based admin interface, makes it just distinguished from the other products, especially from nonstop soap. Any questions? So Lance, just very quickly comment from you as far as how is this compared to as far as the process when you use nonstop soap, you want to expose something? Does it seem a little easier?
We have a minimum of 2 weeks worth of effort if we want to expose something. This is amazing. Ever since I saw my first demo on LightWave
2 weeks. Wow. Okay.
this year, I've been really being vocal inside the company. I want this. I want this.
And then didn't you say it was 8 weeks for one of your to connect to a cloud service
And that
as well?
right. And that was really, we were stuck on sending the credentials and the fact that we needed the security level, the HTTPS. We even had
Right.
HP involved for days trying to solve this, and they could not. We could never, ever get that working. So if we had to send credentials, how would we
Oh, God,
code the
yes,
credentials
yes,
in?
yes.
I'm sorry, this is Bond. Before going to that, into that question, can I ask, can I verify something real quick? Is this
Sure.
LightWave servers expose the nonstop application to the outside world, or able to access the outside world application like the web services?
Good question. So the Bond was asking as far as what we're showing, which part is it? What we're showing is the LightWave server, and this particular portion is we are exposing the nonstop to the
Okay.
outside world.
Yeah,
In
that's what
2
I
minutes,
said.
I'll talk about the second part. But yes, this one here is we're exposing the pathway server to outside world.
Okay.
And in the case of security, this will be where you put the certificate.
Okay, so you haven't shown us the part where we can access the the outside world yet, huh? Right?
Right, that's next. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So since last, what about security? So I'll talk about both sides. So in the case of LightWave server, if you are in any type of web server, any type of HTTPS server, it's always the server component that has to generate a certificate. So here in this case, you want the LightWave server to have the ability to generate, to have support a certificate. And in the case of LightWave server, it's very simple. You can actually use this to create the request for the certificate, and you can use this point and click to import the certificate. Just point and click. You can do it in a matter of minutes. And it can also generate a test certificate you can use for testing. So, okay. So let me jump to the client side, what Juan was asking. And so, which is even more exciting in my opinion. But before we go there, so let's summarize. So REST server. So part of what we're talking about here is migrate from SOAP to REST, because SOAP is starting to give way to what people want to do REST. It allows you to expose to more client, more different types of client, mobile, browser, and so forth. It's more efficient, quicker to implement, and LightWave server is really easy to use. And if using like SOAP payment server, like my friend Tom is doing, and you can basically run it on the use the LightWave server. The migration is very, very simple. It's 90% the same, right? So, okay. The reverse side, want to be able for the LightWave client to consume well, which to me is the more exciting part, because we work with so many clients. Basically, is be able now nonstop we can call the outside services. Just quick question for Bond and for Lance. What are some of the services that you are using the nonstop client to call outside? Is it a Windows service? Is it on the internet? What kind of outside service?
So over the internet, for example, the state of Kentucky, they've got really strict rules on computing the tax that goes on premiums. So we have to call their service to determine how much tax based on an address or a county that we have to charge.
Right, got it. Yes. Okay, perfect example. Yeah, so thank you. So that's a perfect example, because every institutions, any corporations basically say, hey, you want to talk to us? Great, we want to use REST. These are some of the big names that are using REST. The idea is that they will expose their service in REST, and so the nonstop, you want to be able to write an application to get to it, and LightWave client make it very, very easy, right? I'm repeating this here because the same fundamentals, benefits that LightWave client offers, just like LightWave server runs in Guardian. And for those for my friends out there who use SOAP-AM client, this is better than SOAP-AM client, because SOAP-AM client does not have a console and LightWave client does. So you can do things on the LightWave client via the console. So I'm just going to go through some example, but pretty much Lance gave a good example as far as why you would use a REST client. This is some customers use case I'll go over quickly. So FIS, they basically expose a stock sale interface, and one of our clients using wrote application, couple application use client to go up the interface to the short sale interface. Very easy to do, right? Amazon uses it, Azure uses it. Another client uses it to talk to Google and the geocoding Apogee. Pretty much. So, and my friends Kevin Peck and the US Food team, they use it to talk to the MuleSoft API gateway. So you can pretty much talk from the nonstop to REST enterprise. So again, the exciting thing about LightWave client as a REST client is it opens a possibility. Now the nonstop can go reach out to talk to applications on the mainframe, on the Windows, Linux, Java, internet, cloud services, and all that. So whereas LightWave server, a lot of people coming to us now can reach out to talk to other people, right? So, so let me jump to, so again, basically how things work. So the idea is that if you have an external RESTful API service you want to consume, LightWave client is the middle, it's the proxy. So what makes it beautiful is the fact is that your application will talk to the LightWave client, use path send, just like it talks to any other server. It doesn't have to know anything about the external world because the LightWave client takes care of everything. It takes care of the JSON, HTTPS protocol, conversion of the request in and out. And so you can pretty much develop this application. If you have developing request server application, you can talk to LightWave client. And so the first thing is, so if you're going to talk to, let's say, State of Kentucky Web Services, if I were to do that, first thing I would say, do you have a Swagger? If they have a Swagger, basically, LightWave, you can just import that Swagger in there, and that's it, because it defines everything how to access that particular service. So Lance, in the case of the State of Kentucky, did they provide you with or a web service?
We're currently interfacing with them with SOAP, but I don't know that they don't have a REST interface. Most places seem to have both.
Okay.
So are you saying that with LightWave, we're not going to be able to interface?
So the reason I asked that, with LightWave is primarily used for REST, but so I think that if you're going to go with LightWave, you want to leverage the whole thing. You want to ask them, do they have a REST interface? Because you do not, your preference is not to have to continue with XML payload over REST, if you have a choice, right? So you will ask them, say, if they have a Swagger. And the next thing I want to talk about is that sometimes people, they don't have a Swagger, but that's not a problem, because with LightWave, if they can provide a sample request response, LightWave can derive what's needed out of that sample. And also you can allow you to edit it as well. And then once you import it in, that's it, it has what it needed. So very quickly, so the LightWave client, so you have the console. So console is what you use for design. One thing by design is, the idea is that you will use the console to either import the Swagger, and the Swagger then will be used to generate the DDL. Why do we need the DDL? Well, because going back to this diagram here, let's say that, for example, this web service requires you put in the ID and password. So let's just use a simple example, ID and password. Okay, so the LightWave client console will take that and translate it. So, okay, I'm going to generate DDL so that this application will use DDL as the IPM request. So that DDL, that IPM will consist of some header plus whatever data elements that the web service need. So that IPM will contain some header plus ID, password. And then whatever is response, you'll come back here, header, password. So this generates the DDL source automatically so that this application can import that as a copybook. Lance, do you guys use C or do you use COBOL?
Both. We use COBOL and we also have to use the C program. So we have.
Well, so in the case, so just to clarify, so in the case of the LightWave product, you can use anything you want to. You are not required to use C for anything, and you could use C if you want to, and you could use pure COBOL also.
Phil, you're going to bring
in
tears
both cases,
to my eyes.
Yeah. Oh, I hope you clarify that tears of joy, right?
They are tears of joy. Everything I wanted in an app, other than the fact that this is just REST, everything I wanted in an app, it gives me goosebumps.
Yes, thank you. So I'm so glad Dave and the rest of the NuWave team is here to hear that you're happy. So anyway, so you can see, so the steps is that you generate DDL source, and that's it. DDL source, you compile it, it generates either into the C header file, you write C, or you can generate it to COBOL copybook, and then your client program will then import it, and then you will configure the actual runtime instance LightWave client in the pathway, your own pathway, and you will use it to path send to it. So again, this is the design time, this is the runtime. So your application program will talk to this LightWave client, which would then talk to the web service outside and come back. And so as far as concerned, you would basically think you're talking to a local process. It's that simple. And just like the server side, so LightWave client has a console, right? And so the console is allow you to, this is where you import the Swagger. And this is basically where you would generate, you say, once I import or I import Swagger, or if I defined it by example, and this is where, if I can see, I don't know if I can see it, this is how you generate the DDL. So that's how you generate the DDL source, where you compile it into COBOL copybook for your program. So again, this is what you use to generate what you need. And then you can, and let's see, I think, so this is an example. Now, again, we are the reverse side now. So we are the client. Let me see. I'm not good enough. Okay, there it goes. Hello. Let me see. Oh, I deleted it. Okay. So this is where the client side now. So Bon, you're still on. So Bon, this is what it looks like. So now we are the client. So when our application talk to LightWave client take the IPM and translate into a request. So this is now the nonstop sending out the HTTP request. You can see it takes the IPM, it generates into JSON, and then it got the response back. So this is from the remote side for the REST server. And it also shows us the IPM buffer that we pass to LightWave client and the response that comes back. So again, it makes it very easy for us to look at the IPM and also performance information. So look at this here. So you can see that I call outside, it took the external world, it went across the internet to their slow system. It took 6 seconds for them to come back to us. So you can look at this, you can see when people complain about response time, you can say, oh, wait a minute, it's not a problem. It took X number of times for serialization, connect, SSL. So this is very, very nice, very, very easy. And you can also, like, for example, this is an interesting thing when you do the REST client. A lot of times people use the header information for authentication information, like the keys, right? Things like that's in the header. Again, with the diagnostic log, you can see everything there, right?
It looked great. Yeah, thank you, Phil.
Okay. All right. So we're starting to run low on time, but I do want to point out that Dave Bellevue from NuWave has put in some really good, great demo in the GitHub. That's demo for the server. There's demo for the client. So for example, here, this is the client for geocode. And if you have time, definitely, whenever you're ready, I'll help you install LightWave client, LightWave server on your system. I'll walk you through as far as doing that. You can actually have a complete hands-on, something up and running in a matter of minutes, right? This geocode demo basically allows you to indirectly put in an address, and it goes to Google API and comes back with information about the geographic location of the address, right? So again, why use REST? Why migrate from SOAP? REST client is much, much more exciting. If you have to access anything out there, 99% of the time, people expose as REST. And it allows you to do it easier, allows you to do it quicker. And again, so Tom, you still on, Tom Shaper? So Tom, so
Yes, I'm
when you
on.
migrate from SOAP-AM client, like, yeah, we go LightWave client to SOAP-AM client. LightWave client is also very straightforward. One of the key differences is that in the case of SOAP-AM client, you say you access it, either come back most likely in 200 or maybe 404, 500. And
Yeah.
depending on remote service now, they could choose to say, oh, we can probably return you a 300, a 301, 401, whatever stuff. So the choice of mapping the response to the code is more, that does more variety depending on what the other side is. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same. You populate the header to specify which method you want to invoke. You populate the payload, and then when it comes back, you check the header, say, is it 0? That means good. If it's 1, that means never got there. 2, error, and so forth. So
Okay.
I'm going to pause. Any questions and comments? Casey, any questions? Do we have any questions? Any comments?
No, not now. I mean, one thing I will say is due to the technical difficulties, we did miss a little bit of information. So if anyone on the call would like anything extra or would like to do a one-on-one, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will send out a follow-up email to everyone. So if you do have any additional questions, there'll be another chance to ask those as well.
Great. Yeah, let me just wrap this up. A couple of things. If you are new to REST, so a couple of things I want to make sure. There are a lot of tools out there. A couple of things that I want to point out. There is, if someone provides you a Swagger and you want to be able to validate the Swagger, because believe it or not, sometimes when people provide you a Swagger to their REST services, it doesn't work. And first time I encountered, I was kind of surprised. Then I found out that the reason it doesn't work is because instead of following the rule and generating the Swagger to map the service, they actually did it by hand. So what they did actually doesn't really match exactly. So this is a site where you could actually go in and test it out to make sure it is correct, because no sense for you to work through all your work and run your program and file doesn't work and then pointing fingers. This shows that your Swagger is not corrected before you can do that. SOAP UI, all of you have used SOAP, of course, use SOAP UI, but SOAP UI also does REST. So if you're familiar with SOAP UI and you're more comfortable with it, use SOAP UI and you can use that to test. So if you're going to, for example, call a service, let's say State of Kentucky REST service, again, before you codified it using LightWave, you say, let me test it out standalone using a third-party tool, SOAP UI, to make sure it works and how it works. And then you can then translate that into the LightWave application. The other one's more popular in the REST world is Postman. Again, people use it, and it's strictly REST. I find that it's pretty much similar to SOAP UI. So if you know REST and you know Postman, use it. Otherwise, SOAP UI I find actually it's easier to use. But both tools are good. Always the basic takeaway is the fact, always make sure you use the tool to test out the REST service before you put into the program, right? So one more thing is we have some NuWave video talking about, walking you through about what's available on the GitHub, and we'll follow up and share that with you. And so if you need help as far as seeing what is available, this will be very helpful. Lots of good information. And like Casey said, we're here to help you. So we'll be glad to follow up with questions. I love talking to people, love to show you how it works. And we can certainly do one-on-one, do a follow-up call and show you and answer all your questions.